Okay. The Torah portion for this week is Vayeshev. He settled. It's found in Genesis 37:1 to chapter 40, verse 23. The Haftarah portion is Amos chapter 2, verse 6 through Amos chapter 3, verse 8. And the Brit Hadashah portion is Matthew chapter 1, verse 18 through 25. And we'll do the pictograms and the numbers really fast, and then we'll get into the Torah portion because there's a lot in it. So you start out with the letter Vav, and the pictogram is a peg or nail head secure hook. The number 6 is a man. Okay, and then we have the letter Yud. The pictogram is the hand, work for worship, the number 10. Then we have the letter Shin, and for the Hebrew people, for the Jewish people, the letter Shin represents Hashem, and it means sharp press eater 2, the number 300, and this will reference back to the faithful remnant, the men in Gideon's army. The number 10 for the Yud was the 10 statements of creation, and the 10 words on Mount Sinai, and the 10 men in a minyan. And then we have the letter Vav, the floor plan of the tent, family house inside the number 2, referencing the 2 tablets, the 10 commandments. So what we have here is that you have, you have a man and the Shin that represents God, who's God and man? Yeshua, right? Mm-hmm. And Yeshua took his disciples, Yeshua Prasitu, he had them at the Passover Seder before he went out to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prayed. And at the Seder with the disciples, he said what? He broke the bread and said, take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you, do this in remembrance of me. He was betrayed by Judas, they put a crown of thorns on his head and they crucified him, right? And Yeshua HaMashiach is what? He's the leader of the family, right? Mm-hmm. He's the shepherd, he's in charge of everything. The 1 is Hashem, the 2 is the tablets. The 3 is the Father, Son, and Spirit, the Torah, the writings, and the prophets. 8 is a new beginning. The 12 is the 12 tribes. And the 318, as Angela has here, is the gematria for Eliezer. Back in Genesis 14, when Abraham goes to fight with the kings and rescue Lot, Eliezer's name adds up to 318. They're the warriors of Abraham. So you have the 12 tribes right here. So there's a lot in there. Mm-hmm. And when we go into this Torah portion, we'll be talking about Jacob and his sons and his wives and all of the things that are going on. And we'll have Debbie start with Genesis chapter 37 and go ahead and read verse 1 through 4.
Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him.
Okay.
Sibling rivalry.
Yeah. So we start out, and that's the name of the Torah portion. He settled Vayeshev. So Jacob has gone through his life, right? He fled from Esau. He went and he stayed with Laban. He came back. He met up with Esau, right? And now he's back in the land of Canaan, and he thinks he's going to settle and that he will have peace, right?
Yeah.
and raise his family, and everything will be fine.
Settle down in tranquility.
Right, settle down in tranquility. But that's not what happens in this Torah portion.
Mm-mm.
And so it says, these are the chronicles of Jacob. Okay, Joseph at the age of 17 years. So he's 17 years old, and he's a shepherd with his brother, okay, with his brothers by the flock. And he says he was a youth with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Okay, and they say here, okay, he's out with the flocks, he's a shepherd, and they say that he's staying with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah to encourage them and strengthen them and comfort them, because the sons of Leah looked down on the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah because they were handmaids originally. And so they say in the Midrashes that Joseph, being the son of the favored wife, went with them to show them that they weren't separate and that the other brothers weren't better than they were. See what I'm saying there?
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to encourage them. Look, I'll hang with you guys. I'm no better than you are. And my mom is the favored wife, right? We're all equal. We're all brothers. We all have to work together.
Yes.
And they say where it talks about he brought evil reports, there's a separation there. It says he was a youth with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And then it goes, and Joseph would bring evil reports about them to their father, where it says them there, the Midrash was talking about that was the sons of Leah. And that he brought the evil report about the sons of Leah. And so he was trying to, like make everything right and get everybody at the same level. Hey, we're all brothers, we all work together. And what happens after this now, it says though that Joseph made a mistake here, because when he brought his reports about his brothers, the Midrash says that he didn't thoroughly investigate the situations.
So it
And
wasn't
that
always right.
the information that he brought to his father was only partially correct, and that there was a reason that the brothers did what they did, that brothers didn't do something that was wrong. It only appeared to Joseph to be something wrong because he didn't understand everything that was going on at the time. And so in verse 3 it says, Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, since he was a child of his old age. And in one of the midrashes I was
How
reading,
old was he?
17.
okay,
Oh, Jacob.
Joseph is 17, but Jacob is
How old? Way old.
way old. Okay,
Okay, we don't know.
he's over 100. But
Wow.
what happens here, where it says old age, is they say that Joseph is not the son of Jacob's old age. Benjamin is. And what they're saying here was that where it says that Joseph was a child of Jacob's old age, or Israel's old age, actually old age means that Joseph was a child of wisdom, that he had the wisdom of a person of old age. Okay, because he studied Torah with his father Jacob, whereas the other brothers weren't as studious. They didn't get in and dig into Torah, and they didn't know as much of the secrets of Torah as Joseph did. So basically, Joseph had the Torah knowledge and the wisdom of an old man, even though he was only 17. So Israel makes him a fine woolen tunic, and in the Hebrew, it calls it ketone
Long sleeves,
pasim,
right?
pasim,
Long sleeves.
okay, with long sleeves, and that meant
Underwear.
that at this point that Jacob
Royalty.
was giving Joseph the position of overseer as the head shepherd to watch over all of his other brothers as they shepherded all the different flocks. So Joseph became like the overseer, the supervisor over all of his brothers. Now, katonet pasim, as we said, is a garment, robe that went down to the palms of the hands to show that that person was the overseer, the supervisor, the person in charge, the one that told people what they were supposed to do, not the one that had to get in there physically and do the dirty work. Okay?
It's like
But-
the boss.
Huh?
He's like the boss.
The boss, right. So Joseph is made the boss over his brothers, even though he's only 17. He's the youngest brother. And this garment now, Kedonet Pasim, the first place where it's mentioned, and remember in the other Torah studies how we talked about the garment of Adam and Eve that God gave to them in the garden after they sinned, right? They tried to cover themselves, and the Lord covered them with the skin of the animal, right? And so what happens is the term used to describe the gift, the robe given to Joseph, is katonet pasim. The first time this word is used was to describe the first set of clothes which were given to Adam and Eve in the garden. That's the first mention of it. The second mention of it is right now. Jacob gives it to Joseph. And it goes back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 7 and 21. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together. For Adam and for his wife, the Lord God made coats of skins and clothed them. Genesis chapter 3:21. And so they say that it's strange that the same exact term is used to describe the gift that Jacob gave to Joseph. It's the exact same terminology used in Genesis chapter 3 and here in Genesis chapter 37.
Same words and everything?
Yeah, same words. And so the tradition is that these clothes were the same ones handed down from Adam to Nimrod to Esau, and finally used by Jacob to get the blessing from his father. And they say that these were the clothes given to Joseph. And they say that if this is the case, then we can understand the division between Esau and Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used one other time later on in Scripture in 2 Samuel. But right now we're just involved with Joseph and tying it back with the Garden of Eden. And so there's another term here, another usage of the
I
term.
found it.
Huh?
I found it.
You
The
found-
Hebrew. I was looking for the Hebrew.
Yeah. And so it also ties in another time the term katonet is used in relation to the garb of the priests. In Exodus 28, 40 and 41, it says, "And for Aaron's sons you shall make coats, and you shall make for them girdles and turbans shall you make for them for glory and for beauty, and you shall put them upon Aaron your brother and his sons with him, and shall anoint them and consecrate them and sanctify them, so that they can minister to me in the priest's office." And so there's a connection here between Joseph and the garments he's given and the priesthood. So these garments, according to the tradition, are very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be another reason to stir things up in the family. The situation, of course, is created by Jacob giving this garment to Joseph and showing him favor over all his other brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sibling rivalry, right?
At its best.
That's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as Debbie read a minute ago, in verse 4, his brothers saw that it was he whom his father loved most of all his brothers, and they hated him and would not talk to him peaceably. So he was basically ostracized and an outcast from his brothers
In his own family.
in his own family. And
Been there.
we see too, Joseph didn't help the matter either, because he brought back all these bad reports to his father Jacob about his brothers.
Maybe he didn't have a good one to bring. That's the problem he might
Yeah.
not have had.
Well, in the Midrashes, they explain what he did.
They guess at.
And, there were different situations they came up, but according to Torah, what the brothers did was legal, but according to Joseph's viewpoint, it wasn't. And so
Well,
they
too,
they had a division there.
if he sat and studied the scripture,
Right.
as being,
Right,
what do you say? You described it as him being, wise in his old
Right.
age.
right,
Joseph, wise for his age.
Right.
Joseph, right?
right. So he understood the Torah better than his brothers did.
Mm-hmm. That's what it sounds like.
And so, but he would get in trouble because he would give a report to his father, and then the brothers would have to answer to Jacob, and it stirred up more of a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and now we get to the next conflict. Okay, so Angela's going to read verse 5 through verse, verse 11.
Joseph dreamt a dream, which he told to his brothers, and they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear, if you please, this dream which I dreamt. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field, when behold, my sheaf arose and also remained standing. And then behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Would you then reign over us? Would you then dominate us?" And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his talk.
Mm-hmm.
He dreamt another dream and related it to his brothers. And he said, "Look, I dreamt another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And he related it to his father and to his brothers. His father scolded him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamt? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow down to you to the ground?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind.
Right. So now we already have division, right? Because he's put what?
He's
In charge of all his brothers.
Mhm,
Then he's given the coat of many colors.
mhm.
Then he gives evil reports about his brothers to his father. And now he's telling them a dream that they're all going to bow down to him. Stirring up the pot, right?
Yeah.
And it just goes on and on. He has one dream, and then he adds to it by telling them another one.
Just digging a little deeper in the hole.
And so, but his father here tries to calm everything down, right? Jacob sees what's happening. Jacob sees what's happening. And it says in verse 10 that Jacob scolded him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamt? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and everybody bow down to you to the ground?" And so he was kind of trying to calm everything down and push everything kind of in the background there and quiet everything down. But it says in verse 11 that his brothers were jealous of him. And I believe when they heard what Joseph said, they took it to heart. They actually believed what he was saying, that one day he would rule over them.
They saw
He
it
was
coming.
already their boss, right?
Yeah,
They saw it coming.
They could see it coming,
it's like a prophecy.
like a prophecy. And it says that Jacob, okay, his father, kept this matter in mind. And actually, they say in the Midrash that Jacob went and asked the Lord about the dreams and the
Told him
things
bye-bye.
that Joseph told him. And the Lord spoke to Jacob and confirmed everything that Joseph had told him. That one day, indeed, all of the brothers were going to bow down to Joseph. But it says in the Chumash that he kept this matter in mind.
That's what that meant.
Yeah, that he actually went to the Lord and asked the Lord about it.
Of course he would.
And
If
the
he
Lord
tried,
con-
came up with something
and the-
like that, he would
and
say,
the
"Is
Lord
this right there,
confirmed
God?"
it to
Yeah.
him.
For sure.
But
You
the
didn't
Lord
make it up.
confirmed this to him.
He dreamt it twice on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what is happening here, actually, they say, is Joseph isn't doing this to stir things up. Although that's what's going to happen. And this is all to become part of God's plan to save all the people down the road from
With
here.
with all the food.
And so if all of these things don't come to pass, all of the other prophecies won't happen.
Right.
And so somehow Joseph sees this. He doesn't know everything involved. Well, you know what I mean, the whole plan, all of the things he's going to go through to get to where he's supposed to be. But he knows that one
Yeah,
day,
quite a lot.
but he knows that one day in the future, that they will all bow down to him. He just doesn't know everything he's going to have to go through before he gets there. And sometimes that's what the Lord does to us. He shows us things that'll happen where we'll be at in the future, but he doesn't tell us the whole process we have to go through to get there.
Right.
Because if we knew the whole process, we probably
Might not
would
do
want to
it.
do it.
We might not want to take advantage of it.
So, Debbie, you could go ahead and read verse 12 to 17.
Okay. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Don't your brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here am I." And he said to him, "Go, I pray you, see whether it be well with your brothers, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again." So he sent him out of the Vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem.
Keep
And a
going.
certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray, where they feed their flocks." And the man said, "They are departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan.
Okay. So,
Right spot, the right time.
Great spot to go, right? What happened in
Oh.
Shechem,
That's where Dinah was assaulted,
right?
and then the brothers, Levi and
Simeon.
Simeon wiped them out.
Yeah, so Simeon and Levi wiped out the city of Shechem, and here go Joseph's 10 brothers to go take care of the flocks in Shechem. And Jacob calls Joseph, your brothers are pasturing the flocks in Shechem. I will send you to them. And Joseph said, okay, here I am. I'll go check everything out.
So there's nothing there now, it's just fields or what?
Well, what they did is they went and they killed a bunch of the people, right? And they took over the city. And Jacob is going to send Joseph, but he's sending Joseph by himself. And that's not really a good thing to do,
No.
right? It says that he was sent, that the angel, that there's actually 3 angels that meet up with Joseph when he's there. It says here that there's a man discovers him,
They figured he was an angel?
and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the masked man asked him, what do you
Joseph.
seek? Okay, and here Joseph tells the man, my brothers do I seek, tell me please where they are pasturing. He doesn't tell the man where his brothers were supposed to be pasturing. He doesn't tell the man who his brothers are, right?
He figured the person knew.
Well, there's all kinds of other people there too.
Well, there weren't that many people in those days,
Right.
and shepherds and
Right.
flocks, and you would know who had what.
But in
They left.
the traditions in the Midrash, they believe that it was the angel Gabriel and that there were a couple of other angels with him. But now he has to go to Dothan. Okay, what happens in Dothan?
There's a well.
Huh?
There's a well.
All these questions get repeated.
We'll get there in a second.
Or a pit.
There.
Not a well.
Huh?
It's a pit, not a well.
Yeah. So,
It's right to your shoe if you keep on going.
huh?
The whom seekest thou? It's in the book of
Seekest
John.
thou. Okay.
They bushwhacked him.
So he's
I'm
on
talking
his
to
way, and he's in this field, and they say that it's an angel that finds him, and he's going to go to Dothan. And Dothan is supposed to be a bad place. Okay. And get there in a second. Okay. We'll get back there. Okay. Get back. Okay. Okay, so it says that the angel Gabriel appears to Joseph in the guise of a man and says, "Whom do you seek?" Said, "I seek my brothers. Could you tell me where they tend the flocks?" And the angel told him, "They have journeyed away from here." And the words the angel said to Joseph were supposed to be a hint that the brothers had severed their ties of brotherhood with Joseph. And then the angel said, "I have heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" And the word Dothan is related to the Hebrew Nikle Dasos, which means plots, 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 which was to be a warning, an allusion to Joseph that his brothers were plotting to kill him.
That kind of plot. I thought you meant.
Okay, that his
Okay,
brothers were
wow.
plotting to kill him. But Joseph failed to understand the warning of the angel when he told him that the brothers had gone to Dathan. And so Joseph heads on his way there, not understanding the warning that he was just given.
Okay.
So he's heading there, and he's not expecting anything.
You're the younger one. You're clueless. They can do
Yeah.
whatever. you
So
have
he's
no idea.
not expecting anything
To happen.
to happen.
Out of the ordinary.
Out of, like what normally would happen, that maybe his brothers wouldn't talk to him, or they'd give him the brush, or
Yeah.
or
Been there,
here
done
here
that,
comes
been there,
our
done
little
that.
tattletale brother again. Well, you know what I mean. Go away.
All right.
Comes that troublemaker.
Yeah, troublemaker. So Joseph went after his brothers, and he finally finds them at Dothan. And so
Dothan ends with a hey in the Hebrew. It's a
It
dollar.
just means the direction is going that way.
yeah,
That's why there's a hay.
Oh,
The
that's-
direction is going towards the town, and they put a hay on the end of it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
so it's Angela's turn now. Okay,
Mine,
verse.
isn't it?
Okay,
Alright,
Debbie.
finish up.
Okay, Debbie's turn. 18 through.
No, wait a minute. It's her turn.
Okay, Angela's turn. Verse 18 through 24.
18 to 24. They saw him from afar, and when he had not yet approached them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said to one another, "Look, that dreamer is coming. So now come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say, 'A wild beast devoured him.' Then we shall see what will become of his dreams." Reuben heard and rescued him from their hand, and he said, "We will not strike him mortally." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him," intending to rescue him from their hand and return him to his father. So it was, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the fine woolen tunic that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty, no water was in it.
Isn't it? Okay. So
Must have been in the summertime, no way.
So now they see him, and right away, as soon as they see Joseph, what goes through their mind first?
There he is. Oh no, here he comes.
The
Oh,
dream.
no,
Don't
here
want
he
to talk to
comes,
him.
the dreamer. They
Don't
don't,
want to talk to him.
they don't
yeah.
want to talk to him. They couldn't speak peaceably to them. And they conspired, as soon as they saw him, they conspired together against him. What? To kill him. Look, the dreamer is coming. Let's kill him and throw him into pit. Say that a wild beast devoured him. And what'll happen to his dreams then?
Right.
But little do they know that this is all part of the plan.
Mhm.
But Reuben hears about it. And who's Reuben? Reuben is the firstborn son, right?
The responsible one, the one who knows how to behave.
The oldest son, Reuben,
Yeah.
right? Leah's first son,
Mm-hmm.
the one that should have the birthright, right? The one that should be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want them being bad like that.
Okay. And actually, Reuben knew that if anything happened, since he was the oldest, he'd be held responsible for whatever happened, right?
Does it always go like that?
Yeah. That's how it comes. And so
I never
Reuben
think like that.
knows that if anything happens to Joseph, he'll never hear the end of it from his father Jacob. Now remember what Reuben did, right? With later on, when Rachel dies and they have Bilhah,
She moved the bed.
he moved, yeah.
Okay, that
And
was bad.
so Reuben,
He already lost his.
well, he knows
Favor.
that there's issues coming up. Okay. But that happens a little later on.
Yeah, because it doesn't.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but
Yeah, I gotta watch
But-
that.
He has the two sons on and.
and Onan
Yeah,
later on.
Next chapter.
Hair and on.
That's somebody else.
That's for another week.
Yeah. We'll get there.
I know.
And so he rescues Joseph from their hand, not to shed innocent blood, throw him in the pit, and he figures what he's going to do is that Reuben is going to leave the other 9 brothers there, and he's going to sneak around during the night and go get Joseph out of the pit and help Joseph escape and get back to their father. Okay? And so while the other 9 brothers are off eating, Reuben is out there making this plan to try and rescue Joseph out of the pit.
But then come these people.
But then a group of people comes along and pulls Joseph up out of the pit. And so what Reuben said is what? I am the oldest. Should they ever regret what they did, they'll blame it on me,
Right.
right? And Joseph included Reuben when he said what? That everybody would bow down to him, right? So Reuben knew that he wasn't going to be ostracized or kept separate from all the other brothers, that he was included in the group. And so, according to the Midrash, Reuben tells his brother, by Torah law, if a criminal is condemned to death unanimously without even one judge dissenting, he goes free. Because they figure there's something wrong. Right? If they get all of the witnesses and all of the information, there should be some way to save the person from the death penalty. And so they tell him, let Joseph go. They throw him into a pit, except for one little problem. They say in the Midrash that the pit that Joseph was thrown in was filled with scorpions and snakes. Okay, that's in the Midrash, not in the scripture.
It just said no water, so it's
There was no
dry.
water there. But they say
Not
that the
raining.
pit was full of scorpions and snakes, and that as soon as Joseph was thrown in, that all the scorpions and snakes crawled into the holes in the rocks and got as far away from Joseph as they could. That the Lord protected him in the pit. But it says that while his brothers talked about everything that went on, that a caravan came, right? They were talking about selling him to one group of people, but while they were talking, another caravan came by and took Joseph out of the pit and took off.
Mhm.
And so he said here, the Midianite men drew near in search of water and were looking in the pits. And when they passed the pit that Joseph was in, they heard his cries and they bent down and saw him and pulled him out and put him on one of the camels to travel with them. And then later on, they meet up with Jacob's sons, and the brothers saw Joseph among them,
Mhm.
because now it says that the Midianites had him, and they said, "Give us back our slave." And they told the brothers, "Who says this man is your slave? He looks better than all of you. For all we know, maybe you're his slave." And the brothers said, no, he belongs to us. We threw him in a pit because he rebelled against us. Give us our slave back if you don't want us to take action against you. But the Midianites ignored the brothers and kept on traveling. Joseph's brothers all drew their swords and started to shout and said, "My brothers destroyed the entire city of Shechem and the cities of the Amorites. And even if you bring everybody to fight against us, we'll take him back."
Out of the frying pan into
Into
the
the
fire.
fire. The Midianites were terror-stricken and said, "Didn't you just tell us that this man was a rebellious slave? Then what good is he to you?"
Right?
So the brothers asked the Midianites, "Well, how much money are you willing to pay for him?" And they say here in this midrash, only 20 pieces of silver, because he looks like he's pale and worn out. And actually, if you go into it, there's different translations here of what happened to Joseph. Okay, and how much he was sold for. Okay, according to the Septuagint, he was sold for 20 pieces of gold. According to the Testament of Gad, which is in the Testament of the Patriarchs, he was sold for 30. In the Samaritan Pentateuch, he was sold for 20 pieces of silver, and in the Latin Gate for 30.
How do they come up with all the different amounts?
Well, you'll find out the truth in the Testament of the Patriarchs and the Testament of Gad. And what they say actually is that two of them took the money for the sale of Joseph, and that they actually collected 30 pieces, and that they kept 10 between the two of them, and then told the other brothers that they only had 20 and divided up the 20 between the 10 of them so that each of them got 2. So the 2 of them actually ended up with 7 pieces. The other 8 brothers only got 2.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Um,
that's how,
it says 20.
yeah, well, there's different translations with different amounts. And so this goes back, okay, in the scripture, in the different translation, it goes back to what their source was, what source the translation was translated from. But what they do is they sell Joseph, and it causes them all kinds of grief down the road. And it's
But their lives were saved down the road.
and it goes over to here, Amos chapter 2, verse 6, in the Haftarah. And so if you go to the book of Amos, chapter 2, okay, it talks about this event here. Amos chapter 2, verse 6. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel and for 4, I will not revoke its punishment, because they sold the righteous for money and the needy for a pair of sandals. That's Amos chapter 2, verse 6.
So he's actually talking about
So,
Joseph's
yeah,
brothers.
actually what they're talking about here, they say this references back to when the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. And it's actually repeated again if I can find it real quick. Okay. I can't find it right now. But anyway, it's repeated again in the book of Amos. And this refers back, Amos chapter 2, verse 6, refers back to Joseph. Okay. So it's also mentioned in the book of Amos. So he's in the pit, he's picked up by the caravans, and now it's Debbie's turn.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead and read verse 25 through the end of the chapter.
And they sat down to eat bread. They lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Let not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother in our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned to his brethren and said, the child was not here, and I, where am I going to go? And he took Joseph's coat, and killed the kid of the goats, and dipped the goat in the blood. And they sent the coat in many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be your son's coat or no. And he knew it, and he said, it's my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph was without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put on sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted, and he said, for I will go down to the grave to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him unto Egypt under Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard.
Captain of the guard. Okay. And in the Midrashes, they say that on the way to Egypt, that Joseph was sold probably 4 different times on his way
No more.
from his brothers. down to Egypt. Okay. Reuben comes to the pit. Joseph's not in the pit. Reuben had a whole plan, right? To rescue Joseph.
Right.
But now Joseph's gone. And he comes to his brothers, and what can they do?
Plan B.
Plan B. His plan A is gone, right?
Yeah.
And so, you notice here though, who's the one that says to sell him in verse 26? Right at the beginning of verse 26. Who wants to sell Joseph?
Judah.
Judah, right? And whose son is Judah? Which group is he from? Judah is Leah's son, right?
Her fourth, where she starts
Yeah, the
praising the
fourth
Lord.
one. Yeah, Judah is Leah's fourth son. Right? You remember back in the beginning, I was telling you that, like they felt like they were better
Yeah.
than everybody else because Leah was Jacob's first wife, and
Right.
Bill and Zilpah, their children were children of handmaids,
So many
and
wives.
so the children of Leah looked down on them.
Mm-hmm.
So now Judah decides, well, we don't get anything if we kill our brother out of this, so we'll just sell him. And then when we sell him, we can divide up the money. And they say what happens is that when they sell him, they use the money to buy sandals. And by buying sandals, what they're saying is that Joseph said he was going to reign over us. And now wherever we walk, because the money that we got from selling him, we used to buy sandals.
You'll be
Wherever
under.
we walk, we're walking on Joseph. Joseph doesn't rule over us. Joseph is under our feet. And that's how the brothers look at it, right? Joseph is under our feet. Joseph will not reign over us. We're in charge,
Ha.
right?
Just wait and see.
And so Reuben rent his garments, went back to his brothers, and they dipped the tunic in the blood of a goat, because they say that the blood of a goat most closely resembles the blood of a human being. That they wouldn't be able to tell the difference because the blood of the goat looks like human blood.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bring this coat back to their father. And in the Chumash it'll say, we found this, identify it, if you please, is it your son's tunic or not? None of the brothers come out directly and say
He was
that
killed.
Joseph is dead. They let Jacob assume it when he sees Joseph's garment. They let Jacob assume that Joseph was torn to pieces by a wild beast, but they never say outright that Joseph is dead.
Mhm.
And they say in the Midrash here, where Jacob says his father bewailed him and he could not be comforted, they said that that was because when somebody dies, okay, you go through a period of grief. And yes, every once in a while you still remember that person and you have certain emotions and different feelings and things. But eventually you get past it,
So his Shiva never ended.
right? And so they say that Jacob's Shiva basically never ended because Joseph wasn't really dead. You see? So he was continually mourning and he could never get past that time of bereavement because Joseph wasn't dead, he was still alive. And so the Midianites sell him into Egypt to Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh, chamberlain of the butchers. And now we kind of get an insert in here in between everything, because chapter 38 is about Judah and Tamar. And remember, Judah was the one who came up with the idea, right? Judah said to his brothers, what gain will there be if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Right? And it goes on, and when they take the tunic, he says, Judah says, we found this, identify if you please. And that same statement will come into play and come back to bite Judah in chapter 38.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I guess this is it. Whose turn?
My turn.
Angela? Okay, Angela, chapter 38, verse 1 through 8, and we'll have the whole history here of Judah and Tamar.
It was at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned away toward an Adulamite man whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a prominent merchant whose name was Shua. He married her and consorted with her. She conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Er. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And yet again, and she bore a son and called his name Shelah. And it was in Chezib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Er, Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Hashem, and Hashem caused him to die. Then Judah said to Onan, consort with your brother's wife and enter into a Levirate marriage with her and establish offspring for your brother.
Okay, and so here it talks about the Levirate marriage, right? They call it Yibum. And what happens is that Tamar was a very beautiful woman, okay? And it says that Judah took this wife for his firstborn. Okay, we'll get into the Levirate Yibum later. But it says that her name was Tamar. And who was Tamar? Okay. Okay, Tamar, the name Tamar means palm tree. And according to the Targum of Jonathan, Tamar was actually the daughter of Shem.
Really?
Okay, so she's a very important person, right? The daughter of Shem. And so what happens is that when he went into Tamar, instead of trying to have the baby with Tamar, right, he spilled the seed because he didn't want to get Tamar pregnant, because that would ruin her beauty. And so Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Hashem and caused him to die. And then he sent his other son, Onan, in to be with her. Okay, and it says here, then Judah said to Onan, consort with your brother's wife and enter into levirate marriage with her and establish offspring for your brother, right? Because if a man dies without offspring, okay, then what's going to happen? His name is going to be gone out of Israel, right? And so the brother is supposed to go in and marry his brother's wife, right? And have the child so that his brother's name continues in Israel, so that the man's lineage isn't wiped out. Somebody to receive the inheritance, right?
But he didn't want to.
But Onan didn't either. Okay, in verse 9. Debbie, could you go, we'll see here in verse 9. Okay, go ahead and read verse 9 through verse 11.
And Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing that he did displeased Hashem, wherefore he slew him also.
Okay, so they both did evil. Aaron and Onan both did evil in the sight of the Lord, and so they both died because they wouldn't raise seed, right? No children, wouldn't continue the brother's name. Okay, the first one, died. Why? Because he didn't want to mar Tamar's beauty by having her get pregnant. And then his brother Onan was supposed to raise up seed for his brother right? And he spilled the seed. And so he died. And now Judah only has one more son left. And that we know
Is young.
was Shelah, and he was younger, right? And we'll read about that in a minute. Okay, so Angela, go ahead and read verse 12 through 14.
Many days passed, and Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. When Judah was consoled, he went up to oversee his sheep shearers, he and a Dulamite friend Hira, to Timnah. And Tamar was told as follows: Behold, your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's garb from upon her, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself up. And she sat by the crossroads, which is one of the roads toward Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown, and she had not been given to him as a wife.
Okay, so now Tamar has been faithful, right? Shelah was supposed to be given to her in marriage. She's Shem's daughter, right? And she's been waiting for Judah to do this. Judah had asked her wait until Shelah grows up, until he gets older, right? And Judah didn't do it. Right?
Probably afraid he's going to lose his last son.
Judah was afraid, well, look, 2 of my sons died already with this woman. What am I going to do? Give him another one so another son can die?
Right.
And that's how Judah looked at it.
The number 3.
Yeah.
3 times and you're finished.
Yep. And so.
That wipes out his whole family.
Yeah.
All his kids, anyway.
But now at this time, what happened? Many days had passed, in verse 12, and Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. Okay, so Judah's wife now was dead. Okay, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died.
It's complicated.
Okay. Right, back in verse 2 of chapter 38, it says what? Judah saw the daughter of a prominent merchant whose name was Shua, and he married her and consorted with her, and they had the 3 sons. Er and Onan both died, and here in verse 12, Judah's wife, the daughter of the man Shua, died.
She doesn't have a name in this, does she?
No.
No.
No
Just the
name.
And so
daughter.
Judah,
What's happened is no
and
name.
so Judah is basically free now. He has no wife. His wife has died. And so after his wife's death, finally Judah was consoled and he went up to go oversee his sheep shearers. He and his Adullamite friend Hira, and they go up to Timnah. And Tamar hears about it in verse 13. Behold, your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And so she hears, right, that Judah is going up to Timnah. And she says, okay, he wouldn't give me his son Shelah. And so now I'm just going to have to take things into my own hand and make him fulfill his responsibility. Since he's not going to do it on his own, I'm going to have to make it happen, right?
Right.
And so she removes her widow's garb, covers herself with the veil, and sits at the crossroads waiting for Judah to come by on his way to Timnah to go see the sheep shearers. Because why? Because Shelah had grown up. Right? And Tamar had not been given to him as a wife. So now we're up to verse 15. Okay, so Debbie, go ahead and read verse 15 through 18.
When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way and said, Go, I pray you, let me come in to you. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me that you may come in to me? And he said, I'll send you a kid from the flock. And she said, Will you give me a pledge till you send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give you? She said, Your signet, your bracelets, and your staff that's in your hand. And he gave it her. And he came in unto her, and she conceived by her.
Okay, we'll stop there. So now, when Judah saw her, he didn't recognize who she was.
Covered her face.
Right, she covered her face. And he what? It says, detoured to her by the road. He's what? Come if you please, let me consort with you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And actually in the Midrash, there's a whole bunch of requirements that were made here.
Requirements of.
Requirements for Judah to go into Tamar. Okay. First off, okay. What's the first thing he says he's going to do? He talks about what? He says, I will send you a kid of the goats from the flock.
Mm-hmm.
What did they kill to get the blood to put on Joseph's coat?
The goat.
The goat, right?
Kid of the goat.
So we have the goat. Then she says, provided you leave a pledge until you send it. And he said, what pledge shall I give you? And he said, your signet, your wrap, and your staff that is in your hand. And actually they say that there were two witnesses there, and that the woman was not going to consort, Tamar was not going to consort with Judah unless it was a legal wedding.
Huh. Makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tamar, don't forget, Tamar is the daughter of Shem. She's a righteous, holy woman. She's not going to do anything outside the laws of purity, right? And so some of the things that happen here, I'll get to in a second.
So he kind of paid the price for his bride then,
Right,
just like
because he
you would.
gives him the ring, the
Uh-huh.
staff, the cloak, the goat. So he's paying a price. And it goes this way. Okay, Tamar is in disguise. And she realized that Judah was not honest with her. And like we said, she takes the initiative and she becomes pregnant. But Judah is unaware that Tamar has become pregnant through him, right?
Mhm.
Okay. But this is what happens with Tamar. Judah asks her, okay, are you a Gentile? And she goes, no, I have become a Jewish. She's the daughter of Shem, right? Are you married? No, she's a widow. Her husband died, right?
Right.
Has your father destined you for another man? No, I am an orphan.
Mhm.
So she's going through all the rules, right? No, I am an orphan. So she asks him, what will you give me for coming into me? And he says, I will give you a kid of the goats from the flock. Judah deceived his father with the kid of a goat, right?
Yeah.
Says, well, Tamar said, will you give me a pledge until then? And he said, what pledge? And she said, give me your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand with your signet ring, and betroth me as is proper. This is according to the Midrash. If you want to come into me and consort with me, you have to be my husband.
Mhm.
And by that, he should have known that she wasn't just some ordinary prostitute or a harlot or whatever. And it says in the Midrash that Judah performed the marriage ceremony in the presence of two witnesses, the men who accompanied them. All of Tamar's words were prophetic. With the words, your signet ring, she prophesied that kings and nobles would descend from her. The cloak contained an allusion to the Sanhedrin that would wear the talit and tefillin, would be her descendants. The staff would later on refer to the birth of the Messiah from the tribe of Judah. And so everything she asked for from Judah had a prophetic application to it in the future, in her descendants and in the descendants of Judah. Okay, so these were all things that were tied. So according to the Midrashes and the histories, it was actually a legal marriage. So she's not just somebody by the side of the road that Judah goes into, even though he doesn't know who she is.
Right.
Okay, go ahead, Angela, could you do verse 19? Okay, now remember in verse 18 it says what? She replied, your signet, your wrap, your staff that is in your hand. He gave them to her, consorted with her, and she conceived by him. So Angela, verse 19 through 23.
Then she arose, left, and removed her veil from upon her, and she put on her widow's garb. Judah sent the kid of the goats through his friend the Adulamite to retrieve the pledge from the woman, but he did not find her. He inquired of the people of her place, where is the prostitute, the one at the crossroads by the road? And they said, there is no prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I did not find her. Even the local men said there was no prostitute here. So Judah said, let her keep them, lest we become a laughingstock. I really sent her this kid, but you could not find her.
So now he's got, I guess his scapegoat came back, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Because he's got the one goat for his father, right? The one he killed and took the blood and put on Joseph's coat. And now he has the one he was given to the woman, right?
Right.
And it comes back. He can't give it to her. And now he's stuck. Now he says, well, let's just keep it here unless we become a laughing stock, right?
Right.
So he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of everybody. Okay, Debbie, verse 24 to the end of the chapter here.
And it came to pass about 3 months after, it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burned. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child. And she said, discern, I pray you, whose are these, the signet, the bracelets, and the staff. Judah acknowledged them and said, she's been more righteous than me, because I gave her not to Shelah my son. And he knew her again no more. And it came to pass at the time of her travail, behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, how have you broken forth? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Phares. And afterward came out his brother, that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah.
Zero. Okay. So now, 3 months later, Tamar is pregnant, and Judah and Jacob and a couple other men, they have a court, right? They have to make a righteous judgment on Tamar, because Tamar is pregnant, right? So they judge her according to the Torah, and they find her guilty of harlotry because she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And she won't say anything in public about Judah and what Judah did or what the situation is, because she doesn't want to call Judah out in public and embarrass him. She's willing to be burned to death instead of actually coming out and saying that the child belongs to Judah. So she's putting the whole thing over to Judah. She's going to send him all the information, right, so that Judah can make a decision. So she says what? When she's take her out and let her be burned. As she was being taken out, she sent word to her father-in-law,
Wait a minute.
by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, identify, if you please, whose are this signet, this wrap, and this staff. The same words that Judah said to Jacob when he took Joseph's torn tunic with the blood of the goat on it. Identify this if you please, right?
Yeah.
And so it's come back according to Torah, according to what usually happens. Everything the Lord does is measure for measure. Everything that Judah did came back at him again.
Same words.
Same exact words.
Mm-hmm.
Identify, if you please, the signet, the wrap, and the staff. Now, Judah could have disavowed any knowledge of it, said, nope, this isn't mine. Right?
Yeah.
But he recognized it, and what did he do? He repented, and he admitted in public what he had done, and he said, she is right. It is from me, because I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he was not intimate with her anymore. Okay? So he said that the child that Tamar was to bear was his, and that he was responsible. So he took responsibility for his actions, admitted that he was wrong, and that she was right. And Judah was respected for that because he owned up for what he did. Right? He took care of the situation. And now Tamar has twins. Okay? Perez and Zerah. Now, who are Perez and Zerah? Okay? We go back. The firstborn was Perez, which means breaking forth or strength. The other son was named Zerach, which means scarlet or dawning. Okay? Zerach means scarlet or dawning. And who is Perez? Perez is the great-grandfather of Yeshua the Messiah.
There are a lot of greats. That's the way we're back there.
Yeah.
In
There's,
Matthew.
there's a lot of greats. And so if we go to Matthew,
He's right in there.
right? We go to Matthew, and in the lineage, okay, Matthew chapter 1, I'll read verse 1 through,
3.
I'll read 1 through 5. The book of the genealogy of Yeshua HaMashiach, the son of David, the son of Abraham. To Abraham was born Isaac, and to Isaac Jacob, and to Jacob Judah and his brothers. And to Judah were born Perez and Zerah by Tamar. And to Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron Ram. And to Ram was born Amminadab, and to Amminadab Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon. And to Salmon was born Boaz by Rahab, and to Boaz was born Obed by Ruth. And to Obed Jesse, in verse 6, and to Jesse was born David the king, and to David was born Solomon by him who had been the wife of Uriah. And David is in the lineage of Yeshua the Messiah right here in Matthew chapter 1. And so through this
Down to Yeshua.
union between Judah and Tamar, we have the lineage of the Messiah. Okay, so that's what chapter 38 here is all about. And now we have about 10 minutes left. And now we go back to Joseph being in Egypt. He's been sold to Potiphar, a prominent Egyptian who brought him from the Ishmaelites. Okay, whose turn to read now? Huh?
I think is it mine?
You know,
Okay.
So go ahead and read verse 1 through 6.
Okay. And Joseph had been brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, a how do you say it? Courtier of Pharaoh, the chamberlain of the butchers, a prominent Egyptian, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. Hashem was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he remained in the house of his Egyptian master. His master perceived that Hashem was with him, and whatever he did, Hashem made succeed in his hand. Joseph found favor in his eyes, and he attended him. He appointed him over his household and whatever he placed in his custody. And it happened that from the time he appointed him in his house and over whatever he had, Hashem blessed the Egyptian's house on Joseph's account, so that Hashem's blessing was in whatever he owned, and in the house and in the field. He left all that he had in Joseph's custody, and with him present he concerned himself with nothing except for the bread that he would eat. Now Joseph was a handsome of form and handsome of appearance.
Okay, so Joseph now is with Potiphar, and we said what? Wherever a righteous man is, right, the blessing is with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all the work that Joseph does for Potiphar is blessed, and Potiphar sees everything that's going on. He sees that everything that Joseph works with is blessed. And so finally, he puts Joseph in charge of everything in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the only thing he keeps he just says, Joseph, you just take care of everything. And Potiphar would just come in, his family, they would just eat their meals and whatever, and Joseph would take care of everything else with all of the servants and all of the other people. Okay. Now what happens though, Debbie, go ahead and read verse 7 through verse 12.
and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused. And he said to his master's wife, behold, my master doesn't know what's with me in the house. He's committed everything he has to my hand. There's none greater than this house than I. Neither has he kept back anything from me but you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as he spoke to Joseph day by day, that he didn't listen to her, to lie by her, or to even be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out.
And got outside. And they say what happened here,
Sometimes you're wrong.
okay, was that, okay, they say that her name was Zuleika. And she had been given a prophecy, of course, by the magicians or sorcerers or whatever, that kings would be in her lineage, her descendants. But she didn't understand that the descendants would be the descendants of her daughter. And so she thought it was her responsibility to make these prophecies that she'd been given come to pass. And so she went after Joseph day after day after day, kept bugging him. Come lie with me, do this with me, do that with me. And Joseph was holy, Joseph was righteous, and Joseph didn't want to do anything that would violate the Torah. But they say in the Midrash that Joseph knew that this particular day that there was a festival, a pagan festival, and that all of the people of the house would be gone, and that they would be at this festival. And so he figured that everybody would be there, but Zuleika, Potiphar's wife, remained behind. And so there was nobody else there. And she grabbed his cloak. When he was coming in to do his work that he was supposed to be doing, because he was what? Potiphar's treasurer, accountant, whatever you want to call it, taking care of all of Potiphar's business. He was probably coming in to the office in the house to take care of all the paperwork.
So could he not father any children?
Huh?
I mean, you said that the Midrash said that she
wanted
expected to have
she
children.
wanted to have children with Joseph.
'Cause
Potiphar, they say in some of the midrashes
was
that
he-
Potiphar couldn't have children.
Alright.
And there's a lot of debate and different theories
So
and,
we don't know
and different
for sure.
ideas on that particular issue. But they do have, and it'll come up a little later on. Okay, he escapes from the house, but now he's accused of trying to rape Potiphar's wife. And that comes up here. She catches his garment. Okay, and they say that Zuleika, what she does is she plots with a couple of her friends. She says what happened to her and tries to get her friends to say the same thing and testify against Joseph.
Girls.
And initially Joseph is to be killed, but Potiphar finds out the truth and has him thrown in prison, basically to save face for his wife and him.
It's the answer machine.
Okay, trying to save face for him and her in the community. So, Angela, you want to go ahead and read verse 16? Okay, Debbie,
What?
16 to the end of the chapter.
Me?
Yeah,
And she laid up his garment by him until his Lord came home. She spake to him according to this word, saying, The Hebrew servant that you brought to us came in to me to mock me, and it came to pass as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife that she spake to him, saying, After this manner did my servant to me, and his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But Hashem was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed into Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. Whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it.
okay. Now it says
No
here,
matter where he goes, he's
Yeah.
in charge.
now it says here that actually the evidence was taken and Potiphar actually had the situation judged. And what the judges told Potiphar was, we'll take all of the evidence and we'll look at this. And if Joseph's tunic is ripped from the front, that means he's guilty. And if his tunic is ripped from the back, that means he was
ran out.
trying to get away and that he's innocent.
But they realized that whole.
And they looked at the evidence and Joseph's tunic was ripped from the back, so they figured out that Potiphar's wife was lying. And so they just put Joseph in the prison
Instead of like killing him.
instead of having him killed. Okay? And so after this, of course, we know the story of the butler and the baker in the prison and how, right, Joseph goes through his time in the prison
Right.
and he interprets the dream. He ends up later on, he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And so he goes from where? From the pit to Potiphar's house to the prison, and then he goes to Pharaoh, right? And
Yeah,
eventually he's given a wife named Asenath, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that in this week's Torah portion. But we saw in chapter 38 that this Torah portion is all about Yeshua, the Messiah, because in chapter 38, we just studied about his lineage in the meeting between Judah and Tamar. Okay? And so next week, we'll go a little more into Joseph.
Okay.
Okay? Shalom, everybody. And get ready for Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts next Sunday at sundown.